the thing that I've been talking about a lot, Heather, and I would love to get your take on this. I mean, this news that just came out in the last 24 hours that they're going to cut $1 billion out of public broadcasting. It's been estimated that perhaps 1 in 5 NPR stations could go under because of this. I've been to all 50 states covering politics, and I can tell you there are a lot of far-flung places that really rely and depend upon those NPR stations. And what do they have as an alternative in many of these markets? Uh, Talk radio stations that put out just garbage, things like Sean Hannity or what used to be the Rush Limbaugh show. And it's part of the reason why we have and if you put in Fox News in there and what's been happening to the broadcast networks with these bogus Trump lawsuits and bending the knee, we have a very broken and damaged news and information system in this country. And the way CBS, essentially gave the axe to Stephen Colbert and then tried to say, oh, it has nothing to do with his content. Come on, give me a break. It's sort of like when Trump says the Epstein files are a hoax. Nobody believes that. And so I think, Heather, we have to just sort of take these things one at a time. I don't think we can, it's like a dog's breakfast. We can't put it all in one bowl. We just need to take one day at a time and one topic to some extent at a time. I mean, I was just as fired up about Breonna Taylor as you were. It was just an absolute outrage. But I do think we have to be strategic and devote our energies to tackling these big subjects in sort of a piece by piece fashion, because you're right. If we just try to take it all at once, we're going to choke on that bowling ball.
So one of the things that I think is really interesting in this moment, though, that gives me hope is, again, something that looks very much like the late 1890s or other periods as well, that while you were seeing these extraordinary attacks on the media, across the board, you're also seeing the rise of independent media, which is exactly what we saw in the 1850s and again in the 1890s. And one of the things that I love about that is, first of all, people like you and me are having this conversation from, where are you?
I'm in Colorado right now.
Oh, yeah.
So I was at the Aspen Security Forum a little bit this week, but mainly I was doing a lot of hiking. Don't tell anybody, but I was doing a lot of hiking. When you're your own boss, you can kind of do your own thing.
Well, but I think that's a good thing, that
Yeah.
you can be at the Aspen Security Conference, and I'm on the coast of Maine, and we're able to have this conversation that did not take all of our days in makeup and in getting to the studio and all that sort of thing. And what that is doing is it's enabling us, first of all, to have much deeper conversations. Like, so you've got a number of people writing and doing investigations out there into things like cryptocurrency or into things like the attacks on the public lands, things that would not have shown up on CBS, for example, because they simply didn't have the bandwidth to do it. But you're also getting a lot of new voices. And one of the things that I find hopeful now with those new voices and with the new technologies that enable somebody to set up their own podcast for as little as a $150 mic, essentially, is the idea that while we lose the traditional media that we've had, that we have the possibility anyway to encourage local people and different voices to jump into the stream. And when they have done that, as I say, in the 1850s or in the 1890s, that's when we have recovered democracy. So with these attacks on NPR and PBS and with the mainstream media outlets kowtowing, as you say, to the administration, there is room for someone to say, hey, I live in a town of 350 people, and if I get on a microphone once a week to say, hey, they're going to pave this road, and that's going to involve, putting in a new culvert, that if I can get just 100 people to listen to me, that's going to change the way this entire community thinks about itself. And so while I am frightened and angry about those things, not really frightened so much as angry, I do hope that people are encouraged enough to say, well, if nobody else is going to save this democracy, I am, because that's what I see happening around here.
No, and I think that's why independent media is having this moment right now, because people are looking at, essentially the paying of bribes. I mean, that's what Stephen Colbert called it. He called it a big fat bribe. And they're gravitating to independent media. My goodness, my understanding is you have more subscribers in the Washington Post. I think that's correct.
Well, I don't know, because I don't look at either theirs or mine. But you, I'm too busy writing, and you jumped. You, as many people have done, left traditional media and jumped straight off into an independent career that took off instantly, and gave you far more leeway than you had had.
I'm free. I mean, I feel like, I'm free to really just sort of call my own shots and do what I want to do editorially. And I think people say, you know what, I like that guy. I trust him. I remember, he would give Trump a hard time. Yeah, let me go and see what he has to do over there. Let me see what he's saying over there. And I think they're doing exactly the same thing with you, Heather, by leaps and bounds. But I take the CBS thing personally, I will say, because even though I'm more associated with being an old CNN guy, I started my career at CBS News, and I started there when Dan Rather was still the anchor of the CBS Evening News. And one of the highest compliments I ever got was when he turned around from the anchor desk one day and said, "Nice story, Jim." And that was one of the biggest moments of my entire life, I have to say. Obviously the birth of my children would be above that, but Dan Rather praising me, that was pretty darn close. That was cool.
Professional life. Professional life.
Professional life, exactly. And, I think about what CBS used to be, Walter Cronkite, who used to say that a free press is not important to democracy, it is democracy. And, when you think about Edward R. Murrow, my goodness, the hit play on Broadway this past season was Good Night and Good Luck, about Edward R. Murrow going after Senator McCarthy. That's what people want. That's what people want from CBS. Not paying bogus lawsuit settlements and firing Stephen Colbert. My God, what has happened to you people? What is going on with Sherry Redstone and the people at Paramount? How can they do that to this country? I mean, that's my personal feeling. And it's become like a virus. It's become infectious inside the corporate media. And I think because of that, the folks at home are too smart now. When I used to work in local news, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have all email and all that stuff, and people would have to call the station to register their complaint. And I would be on the assignment desk and I'd answer the phone and I'd listen to somebody complain about what they saw on the news. These days, they can just go right on social media and say exactly how they feel. They can start their own Substack. They can do whatever they want. The process has been too democratized for people to think, oh, we can just pull, for corporate executives to think, oh, we can just pull the wool over their eyes and tell them that firing Stephen Colbert has nothing to do with the content. When we're just not going to believe that stuff. And I think that's
Well,
why it's part of the reason why independent media is booming.
Well, in a way, we're going forward to the past, if you will, because one of the
Yeah.
concerns I've had about media now for a while has been that it is so heavily capitalized and that it really does have to take its marching orders from the people who are doing the big deals. And that, of course, the $16 million you're referencing is a pittance compared to the deal that CBS is desperate to make,
Yeah.
that they were afraid that the Trump administration would stop. But journalism was never about making money. Journalism was always about spreading ideas and making sure people understood what was happening around them. So when I think about what we are doing, what people are doing on Substack or on YouTube or on even TikTok and Instagram and so on, funnily enough, I see the kinds of people like Horace Greeley, who started the New York Daily Tribune, or
Yes.
the people who started the newspapers in the 1850s, like Joseph Medill and the Chicago Tribune, where they saw a real problem in society and they figured that they had to change it. So they started with these little dinky printing presses, and they
Mm.
just informed people of what was there and how they saw the world. And that became the Chicago Tribune. And, with the New York Times is 1851. Those became the things that we now see as legacy media. But we're essentially doing the same thing where people are saying, I desperately care about reproductive rights. I'm going to write about this. And
Yeah.
those new voices and that new assertion of a reality-based community, it not only gives me hope in the present, it has such a long tradition in American history. It's really exciting, I think, to be part of it.
No, there's no question about it. And I think what you're seeing in independent media right now is partly fueled by what Ezra and the folks over at Indivisible have had some success with this notion that there are no kings in this country, and it ties back to what you were saying earlier in this conversation, Heather, about a bunch of guys who think that they're above the law, who think they can behave like kings, who aren't accountable to the people in the Epstein files case. And I think that's fueling this too. I think there's just a real frustration with institutions in this country and the media. are one of those institutions that people are frustrated with. The question I have is, how do we bind together? I've been calling it sort of a NATO alliance for the truth. How do we bind together some of these forces for truth, for democracy, for penetrating the lies and the BS coming out of the White House and so on, and harnessing it in a way that it has, and I think we're all having an impact. I think you're having a tremendous impact, but an even almost like in the way that Ted Turner had when he launched CNN back in the early 1980s. How do we really put a real force out on the playing field that changes the game?
So I'm going to make a suggestion that
Yeah,
I've never tried with anyone before. And that is if you think about Ted Turner and you think about the sort of game changing moments that you're talking about, the blockbuster movie hits and so on,
yeah.
those date really from the late 70s into the 1980s with the rise of this idea of individualism as the driving force of American society, the Reagan Revolution, Star Wars movies, greed is
Mm,
good, all those moments that defined those 40 years that I think we are now seeing the very toxic version of. But I
yep.
think it's not unreasonable to argue that what you and I are doing in this conversation, but what a lot of us are doing as we are cross pollinating on smaller platforms around each other is to create a news community. So that we
Mm,
don't really need the blockbuster person. We don't really need the brand new film, although I understand Superman is doing a lot for us in that front.
yes.
But we don't need that so much as we need to reinforce the idea of agency for people, and we are certainly taking agency seriously within the stuff we're doing, but also creating a web of information as opposed to that giant set of headlights. And this is one of
Mm,
the reasons I always mention people by name in my Substack. So and so got a story. So and so reported this, because I don't want to
yes.
make it look like it's just me springing from the head of Zeus, that we are a community doing that. And the more we build that web, I think the more powerful we are, because then when we lose somebody, as we inevitably will to one thing or another, there's plenty of people to take their places. Whereas if
Yeah.
you think about the extraordinary loss of somebody like Bill Moyers in his era,
Mm,
um, he was Bill Moyers. You
gosh,
can't
he was the
replace
best.
him. Yes,
Yeah.
he was. You can't replace him, but the truth is, if there are 200 of us doing it, you can replace us, and that's really what's
Yeah.
best for the country.
No, and you mentioned Bill Moyers, and I'm gonna try not to get a little emotional here, but you're bringing me back to my love for public broadcasting and PBS. I was raised by a single mom. We didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have cable TV, but I had public broadcasting. And when I came home from school, I could watch The Electric Company and The Amazing Spider-Man and Mister Rogers. And and Bill Moyers was just such a gem on public broadcasting. His show, his very pro-democracy, he was sort of the OG pro-democracy guy in broadcasting, in a large way, and the way he brought it to the masses. And I remember when Donald Trump first got elected, Farewell America, and I thought to myself, I respect Bill Moyer so much. Gosh, I hope he's not right about that this is somehow the end of our country as we know it. But right now we don't know the answer to that question that Moyers put out there. But I just always thought so highly of him and the way he was able on public broadcasting, able to call attention to things like public corruption, and forces, big and small that were a threat to our democracy. And it worries me a great deal what's happening to public broadcasting right now. And maybe just it's the old broadcaster in me. I don't know. But I love your expression news community because maybe that's what we need right now. Because you're seeing all the comments flowing in right now. The people are just drawn to this.
It's a different
Yeah.
my point is
Yeah.
that we're in a different moment than we were 40 years ago. And if you'll excuse me, the entire vibe is different. We don't need a superhero in 2025. We need a community that works together in which, we're not none of us is trying to be, the big the big person, the person in the headlights, the person who is driving things. We're all trying to work together, and that I think is this moment. The idea of fairness, the idea of community, the idea of working together to make the country better. That's what we had in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, 1960s. That's what got overturned in the 70s and then into the 80s. And that seems to me what we are trying to reclaim in this moment. And with luck, we will do it better than we have done it in the
Yeah.
past, so that that people like you and me. And I love your reference to Bill as sort of this great democracy hero, because I think if you dug down a little bit, you would find that he has been behind a lot of us. He was instrumental
Mm,
in giving me the faith to do what I do.
wow.
Love the man. And I bet I'm not the only one. I know you're not the only one. And maybe that's how we change the world, is that we try and
Yeah.
make differences in little ways with individuals, and it all adds up. It certainly
Yeah.
feels truer in this moment than somebody like Donald Trump saying, I am the greatest. I am the only one who can fix it. I am the be all and end all. It feels more powerful to say, we can overcome you.
Yeah. There's no question about it, I'm thinking back right now to when I jumped on Substack and when I left my old place, I got an email from Dan. I got an email from Sam Donaldson, and it is kind of about this paying it forward, making sure that the younger folks who are not that I'm not that young, but the folks who are coming behind us, that they know that you can keep charging, as Donaldson has told me. And I think you're absolutely right. I think it's I think having some faith in the audience. It's having faith in somebody like I have in you, and others who are kind of in this movement. That I think we know that the cause comes first. We know that what's right comes first, and I just think we have to keep driving that forward.
There was a great article yesterday where somebody said, or maybe it was a comment on social media, that one of the great problems we've had in this country for a while is underestimating the intelligence and ability of the American people. And, I'm from rural Maine, and, my husband didn't go to college. I'm 100% behind that idea that people are able to understand a lot more than we have tended to give them credit for. And you're seeing it all around, where people are really getting engaged in stuff, and that doesn't mean we have to agree. We're not going to agree. That's part of democracy. But
Yeah,
there, for all that, we started out sort of being like, oh my God, what's going on? But for all if you think of the longer picture here, it's kind of a moment of American renewal in general. And
yeah.
I find it very exciting to be able to put my mark on that, rather than simply fighting a holding action the way I did for the past 40 years.